Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to Tilda for the lovely introduction there. As she said, my name is Caroline, and I am the Director of Marketing here at WellSaid Labs. And I'm so excited to be joined today by two of my incredible colleagues. I have Martín Ramirez, who is our CRO, as well as Neil Harlow, our API expert here at WellSaid. And before we get started, I just want to give a couple of quick housekeeping announcements. First of all, we will be recording this and sending out a replay recording. So if you need to jump off early or you want to share this webinar with your colleagues, we've got you covered. Just keep an eye on your email for that. Also, please do enter your questions in the chat or the Q&A area. We're going to get to as many of those as we can during the session, and it really helps to have your feedback in there. All right, so before we get started, I just want to go over a little bit of what we're going to be covering today. Before we get into the real nuts and bolts of the live demo, including rendering, which I'm going to need a little bit of help from the audience for some safe for work text for that later. But before that, we're going to talk with Martín about the larger context of AI voice and how customers now are already using the WellSaid API to enhance their brands, their communication, and even their core offerings. So without any further ado, Martín, I'm going to turn it over to you, and let's hear about generative AI and AI voice in particular.
Thank you so much, Caroline. As some of you know, I am the CRO here at WellSaid Labs. My name is Martín Ramirez. I am delighted to be here with my colleagues, Neil and Caroline. And one of the many reasons behind having today's conversation lies on all of the stories that we continue to hear around generative AI, AI voices, synthetic voices, text-to-speech, and the evolution of these capabilities, not only from a creative perspective, but what it means for business, what it means for those who are creating experiences, that are building companies and organizations, and also looking for new ways of telling a story that matters to them. And when we talk about voice, is very easy to jump right into thinking about the properties and the attributes of how the voice sounds and why we should build it this way or the other way. But we can get dragged a little bit too into the weeds too quickly. And if we zoom out for a minute and we think about the importance of voice, again, for makers, creators, and businesses and the people behind these organizations, we need to start with a comparison point. When we think about brands, and think about any brand that you're familiar with, you can visualize them. You know what they look like. You can empathize with their values, with their principles. You know what they sell, what they stand for, and even brands that you might not have an affinity with, you can describe them visually. They mean something to us as people. There is a story behind the visual component and their visual identities that convey what they stand for. What is the bigger picture behind the brand? So we know what they look like, but then the question is, do we know what they sound like? Do we understand the fingerprint of their audible experiences? Are they connecting with us without the parameters or beyond the parameters of a screen? We see a logo, but then we're interacting with the properties of this brand across many, many channels. And here I get super excited about this view, and most of the things that I'm saying, if not all of them, come from listening to our customers and working with people who are delivering these experiences today. There is a little bit of sci-fi in how we envision the role of voice and the role of the audible version and permutations of the brand principles of these organizations, but there is also a lot of pragmatics and a lot of market pull that is happening from our audiences. So when we think about utility, think about driving a car, interacting with the car getting smarter, more complex under the hood, if you will, but easier to use, more organic, more natural. It's no longer a TV show where the car will be speaking to us. There will be a closer interaction. Some of you who are unlucky, you probably heard thousands of times my silly joke of, in the near future, I hope my couch apologizes to me when I stub my toe. We're looking at a world where utilities, appliances, devices will seek to better connect with the real world beyond the eyeballs. And that's one of the examples of where voice is playing an integral role in better connecting computing experiences and people. And then we get into the content production side of the house, which again, our e-learning customers, entertainment customers, people who are going through immense libraries of content, never-ending editorial backlogs. They need to tell these stories at times inside of a global organization where they're teaching people how to follow a given process. They might try to inspire an audience or a community. They might be selling something, advertising something. So what is the role of voice in not only taking the central idea of a message, but also those brand principles? So whenever I might be going on a run, listening to a streaming service, and as soon as I hear a voice, before I even digest the message, I get to associate that voice with a given brand. And then we get into these new experiences that continue to morph and continue to get at us very quickly, where the blending of reality and the digital world continues to get more and more immersive. And at that point, we are now getting into the components of those experiences where influencing the way we feel them requires voice and sonic identity and sonic branding and sonic experiences to play a big role in how we, the audience, perceive and interact with these experiences. So now that we have this high level comparison point between a visual identity and a sonic identity, or sonic branding, if you will, and the role that voice will play, we get into an interesting point in the conversation, which is, from our perspective, here at WellSaid, to get a computer to talk for a long time is not that interesting. And it's not a new problem. The problem is not how can we help someone making an app or making a service or creating content to delegate that to automation, just to say it, to eternity. Computers have been doing that for a really long time. Now that we have sophisticated audiences, again, and we can go throughout the whole spectrum of creative productions and apps and services where you might be telling a story internally for your employees in a company. You might be telling a story to the market in a marketing campaign, entertainment videos, whatever the case might be. And our imperative is not just to say a lot of things without human intervention. Our imperative is to convey those stories, the values that define our brands, the central ideas of our stories, what our audiences care about, in a voice worth listening to. So quality becomes the most important component when we think about adding AI voices, generative AI from a voice perspective, as a very important capability in our ability to tell story, create new immersive interfaces, and make devices more interesting to interact with, if you will. But again, and I will hammer this to eternity, to get a computer to say things at scale is a really boring problem from a technical point of view these days. The importance of quality, and we can get into who cares about quality, if you will, is for those brands that are properly invested and that have prioritized those components that define how people feel about them. And that's where, again, taking what we know and what we're used to from the visual identity and walking into the sonic branding and sonic element, as we think about these brands that have clearly prioritized those components that have in an instant the ability to influence who looks at them. Now they're in a position where they can accomplish the same beyond the eyes. And that's where, again, we find ourselves in this never-ending conversation at times, which is very interesting. And I think anyone who's designing an experience, the story, an app, and the like, goes through it, which is, how do you define quality? And yeah, there are going to be quantitative ways of thinking about quality. There's going to be design choice and a bunch of opinions thrown in the mix. And that's the beauty and the complexity of designing quality. But again, I'll go back to what I said at the top, right? When you think about what defines the identity of your story, the purpose, the meaning of your brand, and you're looking for the opportunity to better engage with any given audience without the degradation of quality in the delivery of that message, which in turn will turn into the degradation of your value perception from your audience, the degradation of your brand equity. For those organizations that prioritize quality in that regard, that do care about the protection and preservation of their values and principles and what they stand for, we cannot go back in time to a world where we simply delegate a task to a computer to say things at scale with lower quality. So we like to play with the wave that's happening now with generative AI. We know that everyone these days is generating something, but the invitation that we have is to generate something of value. And foundationally, it starts with, you guessed, right? That quality component, the protection of the brand experience, the protection of the principles that we stand for. And on top of the quality foundation, we get to overlay, what are we trying to accomplish? And to some organizations that are business objectives, to other organizations, it might be a different imperative that they have to address. But again, we build on top of the quality component, and then we go after the objectives. At WellSaid, we're empowering organizations to monetize experiences and content that they're building with our synthetic voices, helping them to acquire more customers, to create more engaging experiences and retain those customers, as well as growing their business. For other customers, we are alluding to their need of becoming more efficient. They might have an operation running in a global company from a cost center. The work is not reducing in magnitude, in fact, continues to grow, and the business keeps asking them to become more efficient, to do more with less. So while scaling in isolation is not interesting to us, scaling while preserving quality as a foundational component is very valuable and important to our customers. And then maintaining that content, having the ability to update it as the changes come and go, is extremely valuable from an efficiency point of view. And then we get into the third bucket, which is as important, if not more, which is empowering creatives, makers, innovators to build really cool things. To think about, yes, I'm in the pursuit and accomplishment of this particular business objective, but how could we deliver something new? How can we delight our people? How can we create customer experiences that when my customers interact with my brand visually and eventually audibly, they get the best experience possible from the moment of saying hello to the moment of wow. Now, let's take an example. And this is, I borrowed this from dribble.com. This is an application called Happio. It's a social media app. And I want to illustrate, how do we think about that value framework in a real life application? I'll call out Happio is not a customer of WellSaid. This is to make a point about how leveraging synthetic voice in a programmatic way without the compromising quality can be extremely valuable for these builders. And getting into the specifics, so Happio, social media app, they have, say, 800,000 monthly active users, and they're going through a social feed, they're exchanging content, they're creating content, they're consuming content, resharing, reliking, and doing all the fun stuff that happens within this ecosystem. Those 800,000 users have personalized and dynamically created interactions with some content that has voice embedded in it. At a minimum, they have one interaction per month that has a length or duration of 45 seconds. That is 10,000 hours of voiceover content taking place in this exchange, in this entertainment, never-ending feed of interactions between these 800,000 users that, to begin with, will be humanly impossible to have a person reacting to those interactions on a monthly and trying to create the content that is contextually based on the state of the use of the application, personalized for the individual, and keeping up with that growing demand from a scaling perspective. It's simply humanly impossible. Now, when we instantiate that telemetry, that product utilization to cost and value, is a very eye-opening equation where we're looking at 10 hours of voiceover or voiceover equivalent being exchanged by these user interactions yields around $15 million in content value when we think into account or take into account the cost of creating an hour of voiceover, for example. So not only is very far from the pragmatics to have the ability of reacting to these inputs and dynamically generating this content, it is fiscally irresponsible and not in tune with the business imperatives and priorities and objectives of this company to do so traditionally. So now, they do care about quality. So they're not going to be sacrificing that particular component just to go and optimize against that $15 million in content value. They're going to be looking for what are the other avenues, the other capabilities that I can leverage to enable those interactions at a more efficient budget, at a more efficient cost, if you will. And that's where that 15 million in content value versus $30,000 in content production create that contrast. Now, instantiating that framework that we use to think about value anchored on that foundational principle of quality, I wanted to share some real life examples of companies that are leading how we use AI voices, WellSaid AI voices, to create amazing experiences. And we power the vast majority of synthetic media companies that exist. If you've ever seen an AI generated video that is talking, it sounds really good, it's most likely using a WellSaid voice. If you're seeing Instagram stories promoting a small business website and he has some voiceover and all of a sudden he's speaking very contextually, even maybe making a callback to the weather in your city, it's most likely using a WellSaid voice. We partner with one of the biggest business telephony companies in the world, Five9, that based on the feedback they got from their Fortune 100 brands, they needed a more elegant solution to deliver the conversations that they were enabling when someone called the 1-800 number of a big brand. They said, I love the intelligence that you're providing to my experience. I love the optimizations that you're giving to my customer service team, but our customers are complaining that the path to get to a human is interrupted by this computer that you're forcing them to speak to. All of that friction is removed when you use a voice that, again, is built based on the imperative of preserving quality. And we enable many other businesses and use cases through the API. One of the things that I'm very excited about what Neil is going to show you all, at WellSaid, we take the responsibility and the weight of doing the hard work. When we demo the API, when we work with builders, product developers, and even the software developers, and we explain the complexities of the integration point, some of them don't even believe how simple we made it. Our priority is to help you, the builder, to get that utility, that content, or those experiences built without you having to worry about the voice. We don't want to get in the way in any particular aspect of your content production, of your app building, of whatever the kernel of your value proposition is for your customers. We want to partner with you so you take care of those fundamentals of what really matters in the unique value proposition that you've built for your customers. Now, once you have prioritized taking your brand values, taking what you stand for, and instantiating that audibly with the role of voice, using AI voices, that's where we come into the operation and say, I only need two things to give you the best synthetic voice that you can use within your experience. And we're going to get into some of those specifics. And Caroline, I think for now, I've said a lot. I'll pass it back to you and take it from here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Martín. Yeah, so as we've explored sort of the business case and some of the many applications for an API like this, let's get into really the mechanics and just see how easy it is to set up. Neil, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and let you take over, and can't wait to see what you have to show us.
Awesome. Thank you, Caroline. Yeah, got the screen share going. Hi, everyone. My name is Neil, and I'm a software engineer on the platform and API team here at WellSaid Labs. While I can't quite tell a story as well as Martín can, I will be going over a few of the technical details of the API and then walking you through a few live demos today. So yeah, let's get started. Our text-to-speech API gives you access to the same high-quality voices that power our studio. The REST interface provides an on-demand audio generation endpoint. To get started, we simply format a request with two inputs, speaker ID and text. Currently, we offer 68 unique avatars and 4 distinct styles, including narration, promo, conversational, and character. A properly formatted request will then respond with an on-demand audio stream. We send this audio back using chunked encoding. So as soon as you get that first chunk of audio, you can then begin buffering the audio for playback, moving it to cloud storage somewhere, running it through audio processing pipelines, etc. With our latest model, it takes approximately 6 seconds to generate 60 seconds of audio, or roughly 10x real-time speed. For example's sake, this is what a sample request might look like using the curl command. You can see we provide an API key and a couple inputs and output an audio file. Great. Well, let's jump into our first demo. So this will demonstrate a live API call, and then I'll show you a little bit of the code to get started here. It's actually running behind the scenes. So like I said, there's 2 inputs. So we'll start out with our first avatar here, Alana. And let's go with maybe a traditional hello world, but maybe add a little context. So let's do a happy Wednesday, if I can spell. There we go. And let's render this audio. So click a button, we get an audio file.
Hello world, happy Wednesday.
And if I set up the screen share properly, you should have heard the audio output there. What the code might look like for that is we have a sample backend here. This might be running on a server somewhere. And you can see we have a simple API call to the WellSaid Labs text-to-speech API. We provide credentials, a couple inputs, and then we just forward that response back to the client. This is really all the code that's running behind the scenes here. On the front end, you can see we're making a fetch to the back end, providing a couple of inputs. We're waiting for the audio file to finish rendering, and then we're displaying that to the user. In this case, we're using HTML and a browser environment, but you can imagine other clients achieving the same goal. Great. So that is the first demo here. I'm going to skip down to the next section here. While that was a rather straightforward demo, I want to show you something slightly more complex. So the previous demonstration, we waited for the entire audio file to finish rendering, and then we played the audio back to the user. In this example, I want to, first of all, give Alana a little rest here, and let's choose a different avatar. And what we're going to demonstrate here is the streaming capability of our API. So I mentioned previously, this is audio on demand. What you're getting back is an audio stream, and that introduces some fun capabilities with respect to being able to play the audio back on demand. So I'm going to enter a longer form piece of content here. And go ahead and click render.
When you think of some of the most prominent tech products of the last decade, many of them have something in common: computer-generated voice. From smart devices that...
Great. So not sure if it was fully obvious what was going on there, but this piece of content is a little bit larger, and it might have taken a second or two to completely render. But what we're able to do with this audio stream is begin playback in a little bit closer to real time. So just showing you what's going on behind the scenes here. We have the same backend. we're forwarding the response to the client. But on the client side, we're handling that response a little bit differently. Without getting into too many details here, we're creating an audio buffer. And as soon as we get those chunks of audio back, we're feeding that response into the audio buffer. And then we can begin playback at a much quicker rate. So again, this example demonstrates the on-demand streaming capability of our API. And you should be able to see that we begin playback before the complete response. Let's see here. Oh,
Neil, can I jump in for just a second? And we wanted to get a little audience participation. If you can enter a couple of very safe for work sentences into the chat, we would love to render something live so we can make sure Neil isn't like playing pre-recorded clips for us.
Yeah. I'd love to make it a little interactive. Safe for work would be much appreciated. In the meantime, I'll go through one more example, and then I'll check the chat and see if anybody has some fun content to render. This last example is just building on the previous. While we are handling a streaming audio response, often you will want to do something with that stream. You might just want to present it to your user. You might want to do some post-processing. You might want to add a background track, add it to a video, etc. So in this example, I'm going to demonstrate how easy it is to just add our voice to a background audio track. I might actually just share the code really quick. This is our previous backend service. And the only thing that we're changing here is instead of streaming that response back to the client, we are now streaming that response to FFmpeg. And in this case, we are taking our text-to-speech stream. We are adding a background MP3 file and combining those and then streaming it right back to the client. So let me grab some more text here and we will see what that looks like.
When you think of some of the most prominent tech products of the last decade, many of them have something in common: computer-generated voice. From smart devices that millions use in their homes every day to the self-checkout kiosk in the grocery store.
Great. Won't make everyone suffer through the whole video, the whole audio clip there. So I hope that gives a little bit of demonstration on the capabilities of our API, and then maybe some of the implementation details. I will take a quick look at the chat and see if anybody has I like one of these in particular from Marta. Neil is having a great hair day. So let's do we want audio, background audio, or should we just go and let's go see what Alana's doing.
Neil is having a great hair day.
Ooh, that was good. Almost as good as my hair day. Great. Well, sorry for the cheesy jokes. I will pass it back to you, Caroline, and thank you everybody for watching the demo.
Thank you. I love seeing the suggestions come in the chat there. Jamie, I'm pretty confident that we would not trip up our AI with Chattahoochee River even. So it's remarkably good at getting those right on the first try. I do see some questions about like adjusting pronunciation. We'll get to some of that in the Q&A here. Let me just go back here. Before we get to our Q&A, just to remind you, all right. Before we get to our Q&A, if you have any specific questions, you can email us. I have my email address here. One of them we use is welcome@WellSaid Labs. You can ask specific questions there. You can also go to wellsaidlabs.com, sign up for a free trial, play with all of these voices and hear them for yourself with some of your trickiest pronunciations that you can come up with. I want to thank Martín for going through, not just the sonic branding versus visual branding, but also giving some more context to what the value of this technology is. Not just scaling, we've done that for a long time, but really being able to create these more engaging experiences that also meet our business goals. And Neil, that was a really great demo. I had never seen a live demo by you with the music bed, so that was really cool. I learned something new as well. And with that, let's go ahead and get to our Q&A here. I saw one in our Q&A that asked if we would be offering an export option like SRT in the future.
I can venture into that. Thank you for passing that over. At the moment, we are considering different capabilities to add that are relevant to the creative environment of the people using the API and Studio. I don't have a specific date or a validation or invalidation that SRTs are coming, but thank you for the recommendation. We will add that to the growing list of recommendations. I think one important component here is for all of you who currently use any of our services or are thinking about using our services, we are constantly learning from you. So we have an incredible voice team conducting research and thinking about how we can further the capabilities of the core technologies that we have. It is extremely important to us to take this technology and put it in the hands of makers and creators. And this type of requests really helps inform what we do next. So while I don't have a off the shelf is going to be available by this time, please do note that we're listening carefully, and we want to make sure that we give you all the capabilities that are relevant for taking this into your development environment as you find fit.
And on that note, what would be the best way to give product feedback for something like that so that we can take that into account with our roadmap?
Yeah, awesome question. We have multiple intake places where you can share feedback with the company. The easiest one to share in this conversation, feedback@wellsaidlabs.com. That is actively listened to. Our product team and our voice team and our customers team is constantly monitoring that account. So feedback@wellsaidlabs.com. Any ideas, any requirements, any requests, please do email us, and we will be extremely happy to take that into account.
Great. I see a few questions actually about the pronunciation factor. How does that work with the API? Are we able to coach and kind of guide the AI voices with specific terminology?
So yeah, the short answer is yes. So think about the API, and I like to oversimplify this, and my software developer colleagues dislike when I do it, but think about the API as simply another interface to interact with the core AI. So most, including respellings as well as the pronunciation techniques that we apply via Studio, will apply to the API if and only if your endpoint for the API is pointing to the most latest or recent AI model powering the rendering, if you will. So short answer is yes. There is some nuance to that it will take a little bit too long for this conversation, but if you have the phonetic replacement for an acronym or a word, you can replace that string and basically send the equivalent from the phonetic replacement as you will do through Studio, and the AI will take that input and give you the pronunciation with the direction that you're looking for.
Great. Neil, did you want to add anything else to that, or did Martín get it?
Yeah, no, he covered it. I will add that I shared a link in the chat for some guides on our pronunciation. So as Martín pointed out, anything that works through the Studio, typically we have similar recommendations for the API.
Wonderful. Thank you. I also saw a question there about pricing. Martín, is that based on character count, tiers, etc.?
Great question. And it's a combination. It's a hybrid model. And one of the things that I want to share about pricing is the needs of the application that you're building. That integration point is very important to understand before getting into the specifics of pricing. We like to approach this from a bespoke perspective, where we work with you to understand the context in which you're going to be publishing the voice. And one of the questions that I like to have in those conversations is, tell me more about the customer or the user who will be interacting with the voice. What is she doing prior to listening to the voice? What is she doing during listening to the voice? And what is the action we aim to accomplish for her within that context of the experience after listening to that? And then instantiating that into how many of these interactions are you expecting to have at any given point during the day, the week, and the month. And based on those level of understanding, we can get into finding the best way to tailor the packaging that will be relevant for the state of the utilization that you're looking for. It is important to say that we're built in a way that we make it easy for you to grow. So if you're launching a new capability within a bigger ecosystem, or you are starting with a new product from scratch and you're expecting some sort of ramp in your go-to-market and your adoption, there's going to be packaging that we do from a pricing perspective that will help you get started today. And then as you grow, our customer success team will work with you to find how we can apply economies of scale and make sure that you're getting the most optimized pricing option for the growth stage that you might be at any given point.
Great, thank you. On a kind of similar note, I see a question in the chat about, can we make custom voices or unique voices that other people don't have in the library?
Yes, and we love to do that. I think that's where, especially going back to something that I alluded to in today's conversation, the things that define our brands, right, are attributes and properties that become essential in how we describe these voices. We work with brands to taking those properties and using them as the characteristics of the likeness that we seek to create with a custom avatar. So short answer is yes, we can create a unique avatar that only your brand can use. I will even go a little bit further than the question and say, as you think about reaching out to WellSaid to talk about the creation of your own avatar, go back to the listener. I think it's going to be important to get to define the voice in itself, but go back to the things that define your sonic identity and the emotions, the value, the context of what you're trying to invoke in the person who's going to be listening to your synthetic voice made by WellSaid. Is that person sitting and consuming content in a passive way? Is that person interacting with an app? What is the device that is providing the experience? Is that person jogging and consuming content while doing a physical activity? Are we entertaining, educating, engaging from a interaction perspective? All of those components about the person who's going to be listening and consuming the voice become very important in the process of designing a voice that's uniquely for your brand that we get to build with you. And it's a really fun exercise. We love doing that.
Thank you. I saw one more question here about, do we use the text that is used, that people enter to help train the voices in any way, or is that completely separate?
I can give you a sci-fi answer on this. It's a little bit above my technical understanding, to be very honest, and that's where I'm very lucky for the voice team that we have and the experts in our lab, so to speak, that are leading that. Short answer is not really. Every time that you're creating your content and you send something through Studio or the API, it's not that we're grabbing that and the AI is becoming smarter right on the fly. But there is certainly, we pay a lot of attention to the type of stories and the type of content that people are creating. So if one of the predictions that the AI makes, trying to say something correctly, is giving the content creator more trouble than we would like, we will then get to detail into better understanding what is that content, why, those are words borrowed from a different language that we're trying to render in English. There is an opportunity for us to do research and identify how can we increase the likelihood of a proper pronunciation. So short answers, not really. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. And the complete answer, I have to defer to the people who know what's up. So it's beyond my area of expertise, but hopefully that high level help with a little bit of guidance on how that works.
Well, that was better than when I tried to answer an AI voice question in my last webinar. So well done. Yes, we'll defer to the experts on that one. Does anyone else have any more questions? Please enter them in the chat there. I think that those were all of the ones that I had seen so far. Oh, here's one. Do you provide private cloud options for your customers?
It's on a per need basis. Again, I would suggest to have that conversation in more detail, understanding what are the on-prem requirements, why on-prem versus the cloud. We do work with very sophisticated organizations in the private sector and public sector. So we are in a position to service a lot of the use cases that are very sensitive with regards to the information that is being processed. On-prem is a conversation, a hybrid between on-prem or on the cloud can be a conversation. So please do reach out to us, and we want to learn more about the specifics. Out of the box, we are a managed service, and this is a lot of provides a lot of value for all of our customers, but in particular those who are building at a very, very incredible scale. Where think about what we do and all of the research and infrastructure that goes into having generative AI implemented in the context of AI voices. From your perspective, be that again going through Studio, the UI, or a programmatic integration through the API, all you have to do is to select the avatar, send the text, and then you have the narration back. All of the complexity of keeping that alive, of sorts, keeping the infrastructure always on and ready to get those requests and service back the voiceover, we take care of it. There are going to be use cases where we could entertain the conversation around on-prems. Please do reach out. We would love to learn more about the requirements and more importantly, what are you trying to build and how we can be of help.
Great. Yes, we do pride ourselves on working with the customer to find out what they need on those types of things. Neil, here's one for you, perhaps. Is there a possibility of adding VTML code like coughing, laughing, sighing, etc.?
Yes. Well, not yes to the question, but I will take the question. I don't know how much I can allude to this, but we are exploring what it looks like to add controls over the output of our audio. So giving our users the capability of controlling maybe speed and loudness of the generated audio is something that we're actively working on. I'm not sure if we specifically investigated coughing and laughing at this point in time, but it's probably another evolution after we get some of the fundamentals down with respect to controls.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and in terms of like pausing, pronunciation, things like that, Martín, what's the support for an API customer from our team?
If you are addressing an editorial backlog and you have content that you're just rendering through the API because you have your own environments, you're working on your scripts, you're sending that through the API, and you're finding some challenges from the workflow perspective in terms of getting the inflection, pausing, and the like. Very similar to what you will do through Studio, we suggest that you reach out to our support team that is going to be well-versed in looking at your content and making suggestions on how to more edit your text, your script, if you will. When it comes to more of the interactive content productions, say that you're using the API for leveraging voice as an interface rather than content, so that utility and that experience bucket that we talked about earlier, it's a little bit more complicated, right? At that point, there is, and we're very respectful of your design choices when you're building these experiences. If you ask for our opinions, we might chime in, but we don't get to dictate how you build your products. And the reason I bring that caveat is, say that you have, which is a real application built with WellSaid, say you have an experience on an iPad where you can ask a character a question from an educational perspective of how old is the son? Probably should have used an example that I know the answer to. So let's ignore that I don't know how old the son is, but anyway. So the recommendation that we made to the person who built the app is you probably want to insert a pause between sending that prompt to the user, getting the user to give you the input, and going to a third-party library that is rendering that response, and then sending that to WellSaid. So we want to make sure that from an end user perspective, you don't have an avatar that's just doing that because it's very disruptive. So we might provide inputs or opinions on how can you take that delay, that time to route all of the inputs and responses, and give you some best practices. But again, it's very, very important to us that we don't don't cross over into dictating how you want to build that experience, but we might have some opinions and recommendations that we will make when invited into your design process, if that makes sense.
Wonderful. On a somewhat similar note, are there any capacity constraints? You're talking about number of simultaneous streams and yeah, sort of the capability there.
Neil, I will pass that one to you. I think we do have some rate limits and the like. I'll let Neil get into specifics, and then I can pepper in some scaling opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, currently for most of our developers, we have a rate limit of 15 requests per 6 seconds. Somewhat of a conservative rate limit there, but we have made some improvements recently to our service, and we'll be increasing that in the near future. But as we focus on the quality, we are starting to focus on some of the efficiencies and improving on that side of things. So look forward to some great news on that front, but currently it is 15 requests per 6 seconds there.
Yeah, and in the case where you have a user base that's known and you have a high degree of understanding of your forecast in terms of utilization and how many calls you will be issuing to the WellSaid API, we have the ability of structuring a dedicated infrastructure. So it is self-managed, we take care of it. But if you are operating at a scale and you have an understanding that that scale is a reality rather than an aspirational, that's where we can tailor how we configure the infrastructure and make sure that we can throttle some of the rate limits to make it more relevant to the scale that you are operating within. But again, that's at scale. We welcome that conversation. We're equipped to have that conversation. The important component is we will meet you where you are. If you're starting, there's going to be a bespoke approach to that. If we're going for prime time and we have mass adoption, there is the ability to also grow at that level as well.
Great. Well, I don't see any more questions coming in, and we are at almost an hour here. So I would like to just thank you both again for sharing all of this with us today. And thank you to our audience for providing all these great questions and questionable prompts. No, I'm just kidding. If you have any other questions that we didn't have a chance to get to, you can send a message to any of the aliases that we've put in the chat. You can always reach out on the website, and then we will be sending our replay recording in just a couple days. So thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.